Good evening and welcome to another edition of Perspective. My name is Kathy Hicks. I'm the news director at Hicks Country and Q93 Radio in St. John's. Perspective, your show to get an opportunity to hear about the issues affecting Newfoundland and Labrador from the reporters and the people who actually write and broadcast their stories about these issues. And it's certainly been a busy week. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Again tonight, Roger Bill, the executive producer of CBC Radio in St. John's, and Bretton Loney, the news editor for the Evening Telegram in St. John's. Well, we talked earlier, should we say the F word? Can we say that on television? The F word being fish in this instance. A massive news conference this week in St. John's. A lot to be said. We're going to just focus briefly on what was said at that news conference here tonight, but we're going to take a more in-depth look at what was not said. We're also going to go back down to City Hall before the night is out here. The mayor is back from the heat in Florida, and he could be back to what may now be an out-of-control fire down at City Hall, so we'll get an opportunity to look at that. But let's look first at the news conference. Brian Tobin, the fisheries minister, back to St. John's to tell about life after May 15th. We don't want to get into all of it because there's so much there, training and green projects, duration, money. What came out of that we can sort of wrap it all up to say, is it good, is it bad, is it something that we expected? We all know that. What's not there?
To me, the whole big show yesterday, it was an enormous show. Mm-hmm. It's an enormous show. Is based on the premise that in 5 years there's going to be a fishery. There's going to be a cod fishery. It all swings on there is going to be fish. No guarantee you that's going to happen. Now everything we watched yesterday could have been an exercise in, I don't know what.
You don't want to say futility, yeah.
Thank you very much. It could have been. We're going to argue about details. We're going to argue about joint management. We're going to argue about how the processors do this and who's in and who's out. There's a lot of details yet to be resolved. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But it pivots on, is there going to be fish in 5 years? If it's not going to be fish in 5 years, then 5 years from now we have a fishery of like 10,000 people. And they say, well, boys, we have maybe 3,000.
So instead of saying life after May 15th for the next 5 years, it's just life for the interim, until we can really see what's going to happen.
I don't think they know. I don't think they know that if there's fish, that there's going to be fishery in 5 years. There's hope, but...
Well, what I found interesting about the whole thing is now, so we've had the End Carp for 2 years, and now we go off on tags for the next 5 years. Yeah. But I mean, you look at what came down yesterday, and what questions are answered. I mean, everybody knows we have overcapacity in the fish processing side. Well, who's going to have to bite the bullet? Who's not going to have to bite the bullet? We don't know. Who's going to have to look for other options outside the fishery? We really don't know right now. You look at what came down yesterday, and really, other than the fact that yes, there's going to be some more help for people for a while longer, an indeterminate amount depending on the various qualifications you meet or don't meet, mm-hmm. and the fact that we have an idea of roughly at the end of the process you want to have 6,500 or 6,700 people, fishery workers. There's no other answers. Nothing else has been answered. We've created these boards that are yet to be determined, their makeup, yet to be determined what they will decide. And really, the boards are the things that are ultimately going to be making the big picture decisions, it appears. But what's interesting about the boards is, one could argue, well, they're going to have union representation, government representation, fishery worker representation, perhaps.
Yes. They don't know the makeup yet.
No, and this would be a very good thing because it's sort of participatory democracy. On the other hand, no government is going to be tagged with making these kind of decisions. And so you could say, well, that's good because it's participatory democracy. But you could also say, government, who we elect to make the hard calls, to make the hard decisions, they're going to be able to divorce themselves from this whole process. They're like, well, we're peripherally involved, but the boards have the final say. And so what I found disturbing about it is really, even though everyone knows there's overcapacity, even though everyone is concerned about what the future of the northern, what will there be to fish, really 2 years after we've gone through all this, and more than 2 years after we knew there was a problem, none of the big
questions
or big problems have been addressed. And so we're at least 2 years into this process and we still have no answers.
And I'm wondering now if even Premier Wells is setting the stage for what likely could be a frustrating time, a time of anxiousness for a lot of people, because his response to the industry renewal boards, because they are going to be joint. These boards will be joint, provincial and federal. But of course, as most of us know, in Newfoundland, Premier Clyde Wells is intent on getting joint management of the fishery. Ottawa is intent on not giving Newfoundland joint management. And the Premier came out with a tone, I found today, that was sort of angered and saying, well, we are absolutely not going to get involved in this process if we only have to deal with downsizing the capacity. So I'm wondering if he's setting a stage for a long, drawn-out period of even trying to figure out if Newfoundland is even going to get involved in this process. Is that what's happening?
I don't know what's going to happen. But industry renewal, Economic Recovery Commission, there's a ring of unreality about this business. And already, it's 24 hours after.
You're a pessimist, Roger.
I feel pessimistic, and I want to apologize for feeling pessimistic. But I want somebody to persuade me that there is an increasing probability of a future for the fishery. I haven't seen anything since John Crosby went to the Radisson Hotel and said it's shut down. I haven't seen anything by way of scientific evidence to leave me feeling optimistic.
I don't think you need scientific evidence. You need to only look down at the cargo of the Christina Local sitting down in the harbor, and that's scientific enough.
You don't have to be a fishery scientist to be able to count. A mature codfish to spawn, it has to be 7 years old. So if the spawning stock, go into it, but you're talking like 7 plus 7 before you really got a biomass, as they call it, that's going to produce a lot of fish. But it's not just the scientific evidence that is lacking. Where's the political will? Where is the demonstration that governments are putting aside turf wars, that they're engaged in this? I haven't seen any resolution from what I've heard yesterday and today that the conflict between the inshore and the offshore is resolved.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because it has long been a conflict. It has not been resolved. Ottawa made it very clear yesterday with their announcement that the offshore fishery will be coming back, just as the inshore fishery will be coming back at some point in time.
The inshore have said traditionally it's the offshore that killed the fishery.
Sure.
No, it's not cold water.
So there's no acknowledgement that the offshore is doing the damage here. And also missing from yesterday was no acknowledgement of the other problems, the seal population even. But the problems of mismanagement were certainly recognized, and Ottawa has long recognized that they played a very big part. And they recognized as well that in this new, in the new trying to straightening up of the fishery, that perhaps even fishermen will play a part. And again, we use the analogy of leaving the children to take care of the candy jar. How does that go? But it was by Brian Tobin saying that perhaps he'd like to see the fishermen get involved in dockside monitoring and surveillance and test fisheries and the like.
Heard all of that before. You don't have to go very far before you find inshore fishermen who will tell you exactly what happened in his livelihood.
Well, where is the voice of the inshore fishermen? They're not talking. There's lots of... they have the forum now. They have the floor. Brian Tobin has said this is not cast in stone. He's made that very clear. Where is the voice of the inshore fishermen?
Well, they obviously have the most difficult voice to coalesce, right? Because, who speaks for the offshore. There's the FPIs of the world. They have the money and the resources to speak for themselves. But, it's going to be interesting in the next couple of years what happens to the FFAW. This organization must be being torn apart for a variety of reasons, from the fact that, there's questions within the membership about, look, is Ottawa floating our union, and at what price does that come through the money that flows through for the educational programs, to the whole industry, the whole issue of the offshore and the inshore. Who does the FFAW speak for? Can they toe that line between the two groups? And is it, at this stage in the game, is that what's needed? Do you need a group that speaks for both, or do you perhaps need a group that one speaks for one and another group that speaks for another, to clarify this issue? Because it's not being addressed, because everyone's trying to appease, these communities that rely on the offshore, these communities that rely on the inshore, and trying to pretend that this is not an issue that has to be addressed. Government seems unwilling to address this issue, like it seems unwilling to address the issue of exactly which processing plants have to close.
There's no political win in this for the government.
No.
You cannot win.
Not for any of them.
And
that's why
I
they spread
believe
the blame.
nobody's touching it. But staying with the FFAW, I think you're absolutely right. I heard yesterday what I thought was an interesting remark, and it wasn't that who does Earl MCCurdy represent, the inshore or the offshore? Somebody said, this man sounds like the Deputy Minister of Fisheries. This man sounds like he's on the payroll of DFO.
And
to some extent, the FFAW, I don't want to say they're on the payroll of DFO, but a significant and an increasing percentage of their revenues are coming from government. True, false, I don't know the answer, but a lot of people speculate on that and say that's exactly what the situation is now.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Earl MCCurdy, as the head of the Fishermen's Union, the FFAW, gives the appearance now that he's very cozy with Ottawa, very cozy with government. He's managed to get in on the meetings, but there's, you know, and I wonder if we should be giving him at least some of the benefit of the doubt that it's because of that seeming coziness that he's been able to at least maintain a level of compensation that's almost the same, 6% reduction, not a massive reduction, considering so many other people in the country have had to go through, you know, reductions in payroll and jobs. But is it because of that closeness and those ties that he's been able to get this package? Because a lot of people are not screaming about the package. What they're still screaming about is we still don't know what's going to happen in our future. Now, there's no doubt about it. Earl MCCurdy's tough days are ahead of him.
That's right. He's invested in this now. He's invested in this package. He staked his credibility in this package. If it turns out fine, then he will be rewarded with the reputation of being a wise man. But if this thing is as full of problems as it could very well be, then his position as the president of the union might be a difficult one.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at what little I know of this industry and renewal boards, I can't help but think about Canada Post and the federal government. And I mean, there was always that viewpoint that the Canada Post became a crown corporation because then the federal government would never again have to deal directly and specifically with all the problems at Canada Post, because they could always say, this is a crown corporation, it's at arm's length from us, it has its mandate, we hope it fulfills it, we'll make every effort to, but it was at least at arm's length from government. And I can't help thinking that politically at least these industry renewal boards are all about just that. Then the provincial and federal government have another body that they can point to when the howls and cries arise, as they're inevitably going to be, because people are going to be dramatically affected.
Sure they are. And that's what's incredible about these last 2 days, or certainly, 24 to 48 hours. We're the processors. We're, the Fisheries Association, which represents all the processors in this province. Not a voice anywhere from a couple of private plant owners, for sure, because they're very concerned and they want to know. They're not part of the dealings with FPI and National Sea and all the bigger plants. But where have they been? They've got to at least start providing some answers. They know what plants they want to shut down. They know where. They know what would be most feasible for them. But is that what's most feasible for the province? So, and that's where the concern certainly will be, and we'll have to be watching that to see how much power they actually do wield as far as negotiating with government is concerned. But I still got to wonder, are we even going to get to the point of negotiating? Because Brian Tobin says, okay, we want to get started in like 2 weeks. But again, when you hear the tone of Premier Clyde Wells, he is not prepared to move at all. Not until he gets satisfaction that he will have a voice in the management of the future fishery. And he doesn't want to just downsize.
But again, I mean, he wants joint management without, he wants the cake without having to pay for the ingredients, right? I mean, this is the old saw of Premier Wells. I mean, he wants joint management, but when you come to the issues of, well, who's going to pay for it? Are you going to pay for...
The provincial government has always said no, they will not.
No, but they want joint management. And it really is a road that just sort of in the end, I mean, I know you could argue, well, if Newfoundland had control of joint management for years and years, we may not be in the problem we're in today, perhaps. But I mean, all it does now, again, like it has over the last year and a half, is it just clouds all the other issues. Because it just raises this one other thing, just when the two bodies are going to have to get together and try to do something. It just clouds the issues yet again. And, once again, you have Clyde Wells and Walter Carter looking in the tea leaves saying, this might portend well for joint management. Well,
Yeah. Okay.
You sound pessimistic. Are you pessimistic? Is there anybody who's not pessimistic tonight in Newfoundland?
What about some of the numbers that we look at? And there's a clear indication that after 5 years, Brian Tobin has said, okay, it's going to be 6,700. And in fact, I talked to Cabot Martin yesterday. Cabot has long been a voice for the inshore fishermen. And he said, what do you mean they don't have a plan already? Of course they have a plan. They've got point. He said, how did he put it? He said they have 2 points on the graph already. That was a starting point. They know how many people are in it now. They know how many people are going to be in it in 5 years. There's a plan in place, no doubt about it. And so I guess it's up to you, me, and everyone to sort of, find out what that plan is, what is on the go.
But you know what's interesting about that? I mean, that was very consciously laid down there at the press conference. Did anyone hear the FFAW howl about the fact that there would be 6,700 people left at the end of it? Or any of the fishermen there?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there is a general acceptance that, yeah, these are the kind of numbers we're all having to talk about, but it's interesting that, with all these people that are obviously going to be affected, that no one's saying, oh my God, how can that be? I mean, it's
perhaps
interesting.
what it is the fact that it's not going to happen to me or you or Kathy. It's going to be somebody else.
Yeah.
It's going to be the family down the road or the community down the shore. It would be reasonable to expect that once it does happen to an individual or to a community, then we'll hear it. It'll be because then there are no options, and it's time to pack it up and move the church and the whole works.
And I don't want to leave this issue without paying attention to some of the pain that will also come in, as in confrontational type pain within the entire community when the people who have come from the fishery start taking the jobs of those who may have had an opportunity missed there. And I'm talking about the incentives for employers to hire displaced workers.
Big stink. It's going to be a real big stink. And it's already out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, perhaps we don't pay enough attention to it as journalists. We all hear it. I was visiting with fishing family friends of mine, and the son, who's trying to make a living in woods business. Mm-hmm. He's very unhappy with his father and that bunch because they're going to make it harder for him to get a living. This is going to divide people, and you have to have some sympathy for people who are slugging it out without any sort of safety net like the fishermen are enjoying.
In the smaller communities in particular, because a lot of employers will be looking for that subsidy, that wage subsidy. They can get up to $800 a month. That's a lot of money for an employer that cannot afford a full-time person, be it one person, two persons. In the smaller communities, is the one auto body shop. They'll look for someone. We talked about the grocery store, and if they do indeed are seen to be taking jobs away, sure, there's going to be a lot of emotion that goes along with that. Are you ready to move from the fishery?
Sure.
Oh, let's move to a really emotional place. My gosh, just when you think it's not going to get any more emotional down at City Hall in St. John's. Cable viewers certainly are able to glimpse what has actually been happening there. I found it so incredible, and I thought, my gosh, could it get any worse down there? The discussions about City Manager Bill Mann being held in such a public forum, including the Finance Director, Janice Baker, and now they've got another employee pulled into this this fray, and one is accusing the other. Deputy Minister Andy Wells is always there anyway. But now Mayor John Murphy, being accused by other councillors of interfering with the operations of council. What, Brett? What is going on there?
It raises so many issues. One issue being, what is the power of the mayor in a municipal council system? You have a motion passed by an entire council requesting information from Bill Mann concerning the allegations he's made about the deputy mayor. And then you've got the mayor comes back from Florida and says, oh, no, this is not going to happen.
Completely overruling
completely
council.
Overriding it. And based on what? We had a story a couple days before this council meeting. He was saying, well, I was talking to a friend who's a lawyer who happened to say that, which that maybe we shouldn't do this or whatever, which raises the issue. What do we have a city solicitor for if the mayor's going to be popping off and chatting to his friends over tea saying, well, what do you think we should do in this situation? So there's all kinds of issues raised by this whole situation. And the bottom line is it's eating up all kinds of valuable time at City Hall.
Absolutely, at a time when they're, supposed to be pushing forward on economic reform in particular. I thought it was interesting to see Keith Coombs, a councillor there. He's been fairly quiet to get so involved in this, and he tackled the mayor head on. and said, Mr. Mayor, you are interfering, first of all, with a human rights case of Bill Mann and certainly Janice Baker, but you were also interfering with this council, and that was fairly hard-hitting for the mayor, I think, to have. He's used to Andy Wells, but to have another councillor come at him like that.
It's hard to predict how it's going to turn out, but the key question is it good for the ratings for Channel 9? Are more people tuning in to watch it since the circus is back in town or not?
We have to mention that Channel 9 won a few awards over the past week, but we won't tell you all about them now. Just that it is an award-winning station now. Andy Wells or the mayor actually bringing the harassment case into the forum as well, and admitting that someone here, that the city manager was harassed while on the job. I mean, that is stepping boldly into a human rights case that is going on.
There seems to be no limits. The way business is conducted in St. John City Hall, one should not be surprised about any of it. That's my view, as to how matters are dealt with there.
Time there was a limit in city count down at City Hall.
Well, I don't know how the limits get drawn. Just this morning at CBC Radio, we did an interview with Andy Wells that we wouldn't broadcast because the likelihood is it was defamatory. So I don't know what it's like with the Telegram and elsewhere, but
you always have to be careful. I think in all of our newsrooms we watch and we see when Andy Wells sends out the releases and he has a discussion with you.
Let's not just put this in Andy's life. I don't want to say that. There are other people who are inclined towards have to be like exaggerations and strong language that may not be appropriate. But I don't know how these people will haul themselves back in.
Well, the whole thing is, I mean, this whole issue wouldn't even be public domain in the first place about what Bill Mann is allegedly to have said about the deputy mayor Andy Wells if he himself wouldn't have brought it onto the public table. I mean, so he brings it in, then then all of a sudden he becomes the defender of some employees who've received evaluations which they question, and now all of a sudden Andy Wells, the person who's normally the attacker against city employees, is all of a sudden the great defender of city employees. I mean, it raises all kinds of issues. But the key thing is, I mean, is this kind of information? I mean, we're talking about personnel issues here, really. Should this be being discussed publicly in this way? I mean, there's some issues that are personnel issues that definitely should be talked about in public, but there's also issues that should not be talked about in public and shouldn't be eating up the public time of council.
And certainly should not be fought through the media anyway. We've all seen it behind the scenes as organizations, media organizations, that both are even, doing their own legal work, and they're directly involving the media in the legal work because the media has been so involved in these confrontations.
Perhaps the racket we're witnessing at City Hall this week, or have been witnessing, should cause us all to reflect on whether we should be televising City Council, and we're always in favor of more publicity, more publicity, more publicity. But when you see the histrionics in St. John City Council, and then when the lights go off and it's time for have a coffee, everybody's right chummy. There's such a transparency about it that I don't know if it does anybody a great favor.
Kind of like the House of Assembly, and let me just get to cornered rat. What was the other thing today? The weasel.
Who called who?
Bill Matthews. Bill Matthews had called the premier a weasel. My gosh, they're tackling each other.
Relatively unparliamentary language, I would say.
When he said cornered rat, all I could think about was the very public issue this week of the rat on Montague Street.
Oh, stop.
And so, yeah.
Now, was there much discussion at the Telegram about running that on the front page of the Saturday paper, the half, the rat sticking out of the snow in the story?
We have had some talk about it since, but
the discussion I heard was the infant child dead before. Yeah. It was a strong front page photo. You should be congratulated for making a provocative paper.
Brett is turning red, and you say, "I just don't want to talk about this issue at all." That's what happened in the House of Assembly.
What about the Pierce nipple? Any discussion at Telegram about that?
Interestingly enough, very few calls about it. It's quite interesting.
I haven't seen a photo like that in the Telegram for a long time.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You never know exactly what will tweak people's interests or distaste or taste or appeal to people. So
you're finding out.
It was interesting.
Yeah, you're finding out. Okay. So, from the House of Assembly, we just want to quickly move, because we're almost running out of time, to the latest conciliation report that has been released by Treasury Board President Winston Baker regarding teachers. There are 3 recommendations there for a mediator to let's get discussing unfunded liabilities, and the third one is to a recommendation that teachers be informed about how they'll be affected by restructuring of the education system. Is there a possibility, the teachers aren't saying yet, that whether they're ready to get back and certainly get to the point of mediation, get back and discuss at the table? Is there a possibility, do you think, at all, that they will negotiate?
I think there's a possibility they will negotiate. And what makes me think that is a report last week about the maintenance workers at the schools being in a position to go on strike. And the president of the Teachers Association was asked, if the maintenance people go on strike, will you cross their picket lines? And the answer was yes, of course. So much for solidarity. Are they ready? Will they cave in? Of course. It's not very charitable, but
sure.
You call it negotiations, but I think they're looking for a way to stay on the job.
Let's move then to the nurses. What there? No negotiations have even gotten underway. They haven't gotten past page 1, and that was the initial proposal from government. Any negotiations, any possibility?
I think the nurses are in a difficult position because a lot of times nurses are in rural areas are the major breadwinner, and I think that makes it a lot more difficult for them to be a little more aggressive compared to some of the other unions, unfortunately. I mean, it's sort of a double standard at work, but I think it's a reality, and so I think that makes it quite difficult for them to be quite aggressive in their approach. And also the nature of the kind of people they are. I mean, they're caregivers, and I think probably to their credit, and maybe unfortunately for them in a labor sense, it makes them not as keen to go to the wall, which is, like I say, unfortunately they lose out by the fact that they really do care about the people that they look after, and that holds them back maybe from taking the one step that, in terms of their own best interest, might be, to go forward.
The teachers and the nurses are probably the 2 easier opponents for the government at this point. It's not to say everybody won't be out in the street.
Okay, CUPE and NAPE, the bulk of government workers. They now have new sort of deadlines in place. They've given the government 48 hours to respond to their latest proposals. We don't even think that through the 48-hour process you're going to see anything positive come out of that. And after that, then they have a few more days to plan strike strategy. What will happen there? Any possibility?
Well, I can't help but think that somebody's hoping and praying or looking for something to be snagged on something by the fact that it wasn't all over on Tuesday. The fact that they even were willing to sort of let this go on again to the end of this week, to me, in my mind, raised the issue of someone obviously hoping that somebody might have something else out there. That's
right, buying time somewhere along the way. Last word to Roger.
Winston Baker still got to save $40 million off of his personnel costs, and I haven't heard him back down an inch from that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I'm getting the motion that we have run out of time for this evening. I want to thank you so much for joining in. Roger, Bill, Brett and Loney, and I'm Kathy Hicks. Join us again next week for Perspective. Have a good night.